Well, thank you. I would like you all to know one thing that's really important to us at OLIN is BYOE. Bring your own engineer.
Right.
Okay. And Eliza, thank you very much for not only inviting us, but in your introductory comments this morning, and saying how wonderful it was to have the brightest minds of the 21st century here. But I'm sorry, somebody already beat us to it about 700 BC. So one of the things that we talked about was a water-receiving landscape, and the Babylonians were doing this quite a long time ago in the Hanging Gardens. It literally was a water-receiving. It was built in a drier climate, brought in all the plants, the lushness for Nebuchadnezzar's wife, who longed for the lushness of it. And Michael, if it makes you feel any better, they did pump the water up and recycled it. So
They
there's
use
a precedence.
an Archimedean screw, which is not a dirty word. It's actually it's a pump.
This is form, I'm function, apparently. Okay. All right. So at any rate, we really learned a lot from these, and not a whole lot has changed over the millennia. Biophilia is a human tendency to affiliate with life and natural processes. Now, it seems odd to a group of folks that we have here, landscape architects and students, and that you really have to associate nature with people and lead them to it. It's second nature to us, but we have to realize that most of our clients and the end users of our projects aren't necessarily as tuned into this. And so it's up to us to help them understand that. Next. And we all know that there is comfort in the landscape, especially associated with water. And Olmsted certainly was the prince of knowing all of this, and understanding the lungs of the city was so important in terms of our human health, particularly in urban environments. Next. And in terms of performative landscapes, those landscapes that act for us and help perform within the landscape to help cleanse and to purify. You may not know that Frederick Law Olmsted was actually, during the Civil War, was the Secretary General of the Sanitary Commission. And as part of his job was working with the Union forces in understanding some of the issues with water and bad water specifically in the Army. But he used this knowledge when he began working in Boston with the Emerald Necklace, of really understanding that water could carry disease, it could carry illnesses, but at the same time, you could also use water and nature to be this performative landscape that gave comfort and pleasure to people and worked for us. Next. And you can see the natural beauty in that, and we all respond to that. What we don't respond to is some relatively harsh landscapes. And this results when we don't think about our environment. We don't think about our urban conditions, and we all have choices to make. So when a client comes to you and says, we want to build a 23,000 seat auditorium with no columns in it, and we want it to just be there, you have some choices to make. So one of the choices that we made, working with Zimmer, Gunzel, Frasca, and KPFF, the engineers on this, was that a building that big would look like the Astrodome or worse. And it would be such a jarring discomplement to the natural environment. With the architects, the decision was, let's integrate architecture and landscape as fully as possible. So that was part of what we were doing. And then how do you use these terraces that evoke the natural landscape beyond, wrap the building with landscape, and make it fit into the landscape. Next. You can see here at the top on the roof, there's a 4-acre meadow. And this is, again, a water-receiving landscape, but we were trying to use native vegetation that used the lowest amounts of water and also the lightest and shallowest depths of soil. But you can see one of the things we were trying to do was really to connect those natural elements across to the rest of nature. Next.
So we're going to talk a little bit about moving ahead with some ideas about how to make places better and make them better for people, as well as for the ecologies that are supporting the place themselves. Steve Kellert at Yale is a proponent of this idea of restorative ecology. And we say we use ecotechnology, which is taking the world of ecology and applying it into the built environment for specific purposes of achieving performance. And that is the performative landscape. Steve says interaction with nature is critically important to human well-being and development, but sadly has been compromised and diminished in modern times. Through deliberate design, this connection can be repaired and restored. Well, think about a shopping center that was built in the 60s and 70s. Think about your project that comes in later to displace that. You have an opportunity to restore that place for people and for the ecologies that were displaced prior to your project going there. So this moving ahead idea is about restoring. This project at MIT, this is, believe it or not, a Frank Gehry building. I know it's tough to imagine. But here's the Gehry building with Laurie Olin's landscape. I became involved with OLIN, working with Laurie and Sue and my other partners about 15 years ago through this project. I was a consulting civil engineer when I wasn't working for Warren at the time. I was working for other landscape architects and enjoyed collaboration with all. And Laurie's idea about this site would be that we'd reclaim some of this sea of asphalt that was present, and we'd create these spaces that were evocative of New England glacial origins for the site. So they included the hilly landforms that were known as drumlins, which is a glacial feature, north-south oriented hill with native vegetation on it, and these popped out of the sea of pavers. And this feature that you see dominant here on the right of the screen, this is what we call the outwash basin. Laurie's idea about the design for this is that the water would be expressed in times of rain. Water would be shown, and then it would dissipate and go away. Water would rise along its banks and recede, just as a river's edge might. So this outwash basin became the place, in Laurie's word, where the water should go. Well, as an engineer, looking at all the things we needed to do here, I had two choices. When I made my discovery about trying to understand how the factors involved would influence this place, how much water, what the criteria were, and so forth, that would have to achieve this goal here, the challenge was really in making it work. So I had a choice. I said, there is far too much water to be managed in this area. That the water of the building, the new building, and the surrounding campus was simply too much to handle. So we could have said, we can't do this, we have to do something else. Or we could say, let's figure out what to do. So we took the latter approach. And where we ended up with was, we didn't know we would end up here, but we ended up in section here with a split system. The system that you just saw, the outwash basin, is the perched surface on the top. It's separated from an underground storage chamber through a geomembrane liner, which segregates the water flowing, introduced to the upper surface, flowing vertically through the plants, and then falling into a catch structure underneath, a structure that simply holds water and allows it to be discharged slowly downstream. This was a system that could accommodate all of the water that was involved in a way to achieve the vision for the project, but also satisfy the criteria and the practical realities that face themselves. We had an interesting problem here in that the receiving stream off to the left, the Vassar Street sewer, this was a combined sewer system, which was being separated. The replacement drain that was being provided was going to be 3 feet higher than the sewer connection was currently located. So we had to pump. And when we had to pump, we had to understand the relationship between how much discharge to put into the storm sewer versus how much to store behind it in a storage system. By using this strategy, we're able to optimize the size of the pump and the size of the storage so that there was 1/10 the discharge, a 90% reduction in peak rate discharge based on this configuration. So that's a huge stormwater advantage. Now, because we had that water stored in these tanks, we said, well, why don't we just use this water for toilet flushing inside the building and irrigation? In addition, the system includes a solar-powered recirculation system that takes water from below and continues circulating it through the landscape for ongoing water treatment, but also to keep the wetland itself thriving. Pictures of its final construction. It's been in place about 10 years now. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about the specific objectives. That's where we ended up. We approach our projects today with certain goals in mind. We ask our projects to perform to certain levels. So Sustainable Sites Initiative and LEAD, of which I'm members of the leadership of both of these initiatives, have set performance metrics for the work that we do. And we use this project at Yale. This is a project associated with the recreation of our master plan ideas for the Science Hill area. This is the Michael Hopkins design building. This place was a place, it's actually landscape on structure, but this was the place where the water from not only the building, but from the adjacent surrounding campus could be directed and treated through this aquatic planting system. So the system involved a series of measures of moving the water in the directions it needed to go by diverting first flush into the basin, for example, flow through the basin planter and the aquatic vegetation that's planted there, storage of the excess amount and recirculation through so that we constantly have water moving through. At the same time, withdrawing that water for reuse. This place has been built for about 6 or 7 years now, and has, the big difference here between this one and the last one is we actually tried to achieve specific results. We started with targets in mind, how much water we believe that we could save and what that would mean to the combined sewer discharge in New Haven, and the water quality treatment aspects at the same time, all part of the design. This is a fortuitous project because well, I guess very coincidentally, the fellow who was the chair at the time of the Forestry Environmental School here, the client, was actually Steve Kellert, the fellow who I quoted in the beginning. So there was a complete alignment about our interest to get this project to be performative and his own mission with his students about educating them about environmental performance. So it was a really good alignment of synergy there.
You know how long it takes an engineer to explain something? So, one of the things that we find ourselves often in the role of is helping our clients solve problems and sometimes inventing a solution that they're not quite ready for. In the case of the Philadelphia Museum of Art at the top of the Ben Franklin Parkway, a very picturesque site within Fairmount Park, the museum was in the process of expanding their facilities, and one of the enabling projects was to find parking for 500 cars. So we started looking at this, and we said, well, boy, if we had even 450 cars, and you did a surface lot, you'd pretty much wipe out any area around there, and you'd wipe out some very significant portions of the park. So one of the things that we thought with the museum, they certainly weren't going to build a surface parking, but they did want to build a structure. We said, well, if we took the side of the hill out, and we put the parking structure within it, and then built over it, you could build a sculpture garden on it. And part of the problem with this is that then they call your bluff, and you have to figure out how to build this stuff. And so you can see that at the end of it, what we were able to do was to have a parking structure that actually had a lot of natural ventilation and a lot of light, and also then with the sculpture garden that they weren't even considering building at the time, that we were able to help them have an exterior collection, have a beautiful site. And I think one of the things that I really enjoy about this project, in the next slide, I think you can see that it connects very closely to the historic waterworks. It sits into the site quite naturally. And people have a notion about green roofs being, just this, what thinks green roofs are what's on top of that elevator, okay? We managed to get a green roof on top of a 4-acre green roof over this parking structure. And a little unlike the project in Salt Lake, where we were connecting nature to nature, in this instance, we were trying to fit a natural environment within the context of the city. And this is our result.
So to a more contemporary example, this project was just finished. We finished the construction, if I can say we're ever finished, punch list notwithstanding. The site of the Washington Canal in D.C. The Washington Canal, historic canal system, connected the Deepwater Anacostia Eastern Branch to the Chesapeake and Ohio canal system up through Georgetown and beyond, and actually moved from the Navy Yard area today on the Anacostia to the foot of Capitol Hill and along the mall, along where Constitution Avenue is. There isn't anything left of it right now. And our client, the Canal Park Development Authority, was looking to design, to have a park, to build a park that would be an economic catalyst for development within the region, but also pay homage to the canal park, to the canal system itself. So along the top of the rendering here, you see what we've done for design of to articulate those remnants. There's no physical remnants, but to articulate the vision that used to be the canal system. Beginning on the left with the north block of a rain garden system that would turn into a water sheet punctuated by architecture along the canal emulation that was evocative of barges, resulting in the end a pavilion that was linear pavilion oriented along the canal itself. Transforming the site from a brownfield site to a place where people can enjoy the amenity of the park, and yet we can restore the ecological function at the same time. This idea of restorative ecology, recreation of linear systems, rain gardens, developing water sheets as we go from north to south. Here's a picture looking from north to south along the rain garden, looking down to the right side where the pavilion is located. Again, these kind of barge-like ideas. It is a heavily programmed site. The south side of the park, the south block, which is on the right, has a skating rink, water fountain, cafe, pavilion, and it's a very active and it will be actively programmed. The mid block is also programmable for flexible events and recreation, and the north block is more serene and contemplative space. This system is a green infrastructure system. It exists to manage water not only of its own footprint, but of adjacent development parcels. The water that is falling on this site, in the streets, and on the adjacent parcels are collected within the park system, and we have a series of systems that store and treat the water for reuse. We have 100% reuse of water on this site for spray irrigation, for irrigation of our landscapes, for makeup water for the fountains and ice rink, as well as toilet flushing. So all of that water comes from not only the park itself, but the water inputs from the adjacent parcels. This is an economic catalyst for the development of this area, not only the amenity of the park, but also the value of the offset of stormwater for those 3 development blocks that remain. They can hook up essentially at no cost as part of an incentive program that the developer, the Canal Park Development Authority, has provided as part of their package. Image of, this, I just show this because this is a rendering that was done during the design. This is a picture that was taken as it was opened, and it's an amazing coincidence there that they're still almost staged exactly the same. So kudos to the renderers as well as the photographers for that. And doing this in an urban setting involves a lot of stuff, okay? And it doesn't happen by itself. It involves a lot of careful planning and thought and consideration about where things go, what they do, and what kind of performance measures you're looking to get out of them. So here you see the BIM model of the ice rink area, showing the mini piles foundation supports, the geothermal heat couple exchange wells, as well as the stormwater system and the other infrastructure systems that are there. Children's play fountain, light cube on the pavilion. Again, art by David Hess, and just some shots of people. So last example I'll show you is a recent competition that we won for the Green City Clean Water's Infill Philadelphia Soak It Up competition. And this competition challenged designers to think of ways of incorporating green infrastructure into 3 typologies of the city of Philadelphia. City of Philadelphia has undertaken this plan called Green City Clean Water as part of the combined sewer overflow mitigation strategy that they've embarked on. They've chosen to change the land itself rather than to create new treatment systems and new underground tunnel systems that all other cities have chosen to date. They're taking a green infrastructure approach which goes up into the watershed and asks each of the watersheds, all of the land, to contribute 1/3 of their impervious area, convert that into pervious area or land that is treated through green infrastructure. So it's quite a challenge, and it's quite a challenge in an urban environment to imagine 1/3 of the hardscape has to become softscape or its equivalent. There were 3 sites that were given for the challenge. There was a warehouse site, and there was a commercial site, and there was a neighborhood site. We chose the neighborhood site as we've felt the most challenging for us, and our ability to relate to not only the creation of green infrastructure, but the fabric of the neighborhood itself. We can't instill green infrastructure into a neighborhood without understanding the neighborhood itself and how to design accordingly. So overlaying the places where people are with the places water needs to be managed, and understanding that this is really more about city living than it is about water management, but we had to do both at the same time to be successful. The alignment of people and place, we create a system that we call Meeting Green, and that was the title of our submittal. Meeting Green involved leveraging the assets in the community in that part of the neighborhood that already had the strength of place, and asking those places to do more for people by reinforcing the meeting places themselves through additional investment, but also by asking those places to ecologically carry a larger burden for stormwater management, so that the city typology, the neighborhood typology, could also contribute its share throughout Philadelphia if the goal were to be achieved. So areas such as Shot Tower Park, which is actually the legacy edge of the Delaware River, evoking ideas of how design can articulate the old idea of a river edge and water receiving landscape. And then the central meeting place at the intersection of Christian and 2nd Street here, that this is actually the place where water is managed, and it's managed in a way that brings people into the equation and really centers around people meeting together and creating stormwater solutions at the same time. So we're going to be done early, and I'm glad because we'll have plenty of time for question and answer. So believe it or not, we can do it. So Rebecca Solnit has a quote here that I use all the time. Places matter. Their rules, their scale, their design include or exclude civic society, pedestrianism, equality, diversity, economic and otherwise, understanding of where water comes from and where garbage goes, consumption or conservation. They map our lives. So, ready for your questions?
Thank you.
I had a question about the Canal Park, and you're recovering water from on-site, from drainage on-site. And I've been involved with projects where we've recovered water off the roof and been able to handily use it for other things in the system, including toilet flushing and irrigation, that sort of thing. Do you find that there's a big difference between the amount of filtration that you have to do for on-surface recovery versus what you would get off of a roof?
Yes, absolutely. And this is actually an interesting case study for the District of Columbia in that regard. To take ground plane water, whether it's off the street or off the living, the ground plane land surfaces, really elevates the water quality concerns, and being able to manage that water in a way that essentially allows it to be safely used for its next use. In this case, potential human contact is the standard that's used. We, for the first time in DC, promoted this idea of how we would treat the water, and we had to do a risk analysis to understand how that, what that health risk might be. So we came up with a system. There's actually two systems happening here. One of them is a pre-treatment system where the raw water from these places is pre-filtered and stored in the lighter blue tank that you see. From there, the water is then filtered to a higher degree and disinfected, and then distributed into those uses. So it did involve an engineering step where we acknowledged the potential health concerns, and actually needed to provide the documentation, the research, so to speak, that would justify us being able to do this in a safe way. It actually is a precedent now for others who do it in DC, and the city's departments are really looking to this as a model for how to do it. So these are huge concerns.
I think one of the things it really speaks to is what has come up throughout the day is that you just can't do this by the collaboration that's required in multiple agencies, multiple disciplines is just so important in getting this right and building the goodwill and the correct answers.
And making it work.
Yep.
So I didn't maybe quite catch that. So the light color there is clean water cistern.
Right.
And that water is coming from where?
Let me make sure I got this right. Yeah.
So,
Can I?
So the,
Takes a step out of the box, Steve.
So there are two systems. Warren. One takes the rainwater off the street and pre-filters it and stores what we call raw water.
that's the pretreatment.
Yeah, the pretreatment. From there, the water is moved through. Oh, thank you. It's water. The water is then moved through the rain garden, which I didn't say. It's distributed into the rain garden for polishing treatment, and actually finds its way down into the other tank.
Oh, okay, so it is all interconnected?
Yes, it's a two loops around.
No
yeah.
potable water?
Correct, no potable water at all.
That's
And
pretty terrific.
it does use I should have mentioned, does use the rain garden in a functional way to treat the water to the higher level, where
okay.
then it is filtered and disinfected after that.
Okay, great. And then, not related to that, but was this client the city, or were there developers involved, or was it
This was an
multi-
economic development entity, the quasi-public business improvement district that was looking at and responsible for the economic development of this area. So they have an interest in making sure that it's economically viable.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'd love, if there's time, for you to back up and go over Croon Hall
Sure.
in a little more detail, because I've looked at your diagrams and tried to understand it,
Sure.
but I would love to have you go through a slow explanation of
Okay,
how those different systems
I
are
can go
working.
over it in 2 hours slowly. I've done it before.
At least pre-treatment.
Yeah, I'll give you the roundabout there. So what we're trying to do with Croon Hall is, as I said, treat the building water, but the water from the campus. And I quickly hit on it, but there's water coming from around the site. And that's what this is. This is the inlet to a diverter. This is very much like a diverter that takes flow one way and the other. Instead of through the stepped landscape here, we go through the aquatic planting as a first flush. So that first part of the storm, the first inch, comes through and actually is treated, where then it falls out into storage here. This is all by gravity. From the storage, then it's available to be used in the building.
That is by gravity?
It's by gravity to that point. Yeah, the whole thing is by gravity.
So that tank is lower than it
Yes,
is.
exactly. Yep, some graphic liberties here. So this is all flow through, but then in order to avoid problems with standing water, we have to keep water moving. So we then are purposely recirculating from here, drawing from the tank, and recirculating that through so that in times of no rain, that water is continually being treated through that process, as well as moving, just to avoid mosquito problems and so forth. So it's a system that is designed to move water and take
Show-
water
show
out
the
at the
next-
same time.
Show the next image, I think.
The next image, that
No,
one?
next one. Yeah. So you can see the,
So
Yeah,
what's
you see the
Circulation.
water.
Stored in that
Yeah.
tank, it's going to gray water use in
Yes,
the
it's
building?
going to gray water use, right, which is filtered and disinfected here for toilet flushing.
So is this a quality treatment and not quantity?
It is both, because we're removing volume from this, and we're also allowing the elevation to stage up in the tank. So essentially, the extra volume here that you see is the quantity flow rate mitigation, and we're removing the volume of water by taking it out and using it in the building, as well as evapotranspiration from the
But how
plants.
are you sure that the appropriate amount of water is excavated from that and used between storms?
Well, we're not counting on that because we're shutting that system off to allow additional capacity on top of that. And we did the same thing at MIT. So that freeboard, the freeboard in the Dell Pond, for example, the water goes up, that's in the tank. It's in the tank here and as well as the other one. And we intentionally did the Dell that way too.
I'm very interested in one diagram you're showing the overlay between where the people are and where the green infrastructure are. I think the meeting green is a great idea. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how that works?
Sure. The city of Philadelphia's, again, the three typologies that were in play was the warehouse, the commercial big box, as well as the neighborhood. And I know there are differences of opinion here, but I think the easy answers are on the large parcels where you have big interventions. You can make big rain gardens and big landscapes. The difficult part is working within the neighborhoods. And you can't achieve, 50% of Philadelphia's land area is neighborhood. It's a neighborhood fabric. So you can't get to where your goal needs to be without, the math doesn't work. You have to go into the neighborhoods. So what our approach was, let's invest in the neighborhood, in the areas where we will not only achieve the ecological performance for water, which is driving this whole thing, but let's invest the dollars in the things that matter to the people who live in Philadelphia. So instead of burying things, we're articulating them in the surface. So the idea of using these water systems as places where people meet is the whole idea behind Meeting Green. And we have a typology that includes what we're calling the meeting greens, things like Shot Tower Park and the center green here, but also linking greens, the streets that become tasked with green infrastructure, and the alleys, each of which have different solutions. So our strategy is a typology of solutions that fit the neighborhood scale. Before anybody asks about cost, it's much more costly to do it this way, but you're taking dollars that you're already investing in infrastructure in the neighborhood, for example, your road projects, your road rebuilding projects, and you're doing them differently, you're doing them smarter. So there is a premium to pay by doing this, but you're reinvesting in the fabric of the neighborhood at the end of the day.